Yeah.
The low-hanging fruits are valid things to go after, but don't put out the candle when there's a house fire. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Like,
that's another one.
Yeah.
That's another one for the books. Don't put out a candle when there's a house fire.
I don't know.
That's good.
Hello and welcome to the Open Hardware Manufacturing Podcast, the podcast where we talk about making open source hardware. I'm Lucian Chapar.
And I'm Stephen Hawes.
And on today's episode, we'll be talking about cost downs.
Yes, we're getting into what is the process of getting the thing that you make cheaper without making your thing worse, which is an art and very hard and something that should be done carefully. We go into a lot of like, how do you find another potential way to cost it down? What do you look for when you're picking a vendor? What things should you choose to cost down? If your vendor messes up and they fix it, how that's more beneficial than maybe a vendor that hasn't yet, because you have seen the fact they fixed the problem. We get, I think, 3 new Lucianisms in this one. Don't put out the candle when there is a house fire, I think is my favorite.
And we really take it from like the what, why, when, and how.
Yeah. What's the process you go through to get your thing cheaper in a way that does not change the experience for your customer?
Yep, that's it exactly. Let's tear into it.
Let's do it.
What we're going to be talking about today is cost downs, and I found a really good definition of them from a Gartner blog post. In their words, not mine, cost downs are a process of decreasing a company's expenses to remove expenditures do not provide added value to customers while optimizing processes to improve efficiency. Really what that means is like looking where you can reduce your cost to the overall product. And this can be in terms of material cost, it could be shipping cost, labor cost, operational expenses.
Even labor cost? Does labor cost count?
Yeah, anything's a cost down.
That's
if
fair.
you're thinking about it from the whole top-down perspective.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
It's the whole chicken.
The whole chicken.
But I think for the scope of this episode, we're going to keep it primarily to the material cost.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll touch on shipping a little bit here because it's always relevant when
Sure.
evaluating the cost of another source. But for now, let's put the cap at material and like getting items into your door.
That's fair. Because like you could even consider, well, I don't know, you tell me, would you consider, like, let's say our machine is X big and we pay X amount for or Y amount for shipping for it. But if we make it X divided by 2 big, well, now we pay Y divided by 2 for the shipping. Is that a cost down if we can make the packaging smaller?
Yeah.
I mean, technically, I guess it still counts.
Of course, whatever goes into COGS, if you can cost it down, it's still a cost down exercise.
It's cheaper to make the same thing.
Yeah. So like, and again, going back to that definition from Gartner, it's removing expenditures that do not provide added value to the customer.
Right. Yep.
If the packaging was 2.5 times larger than needed.
Exactly. Yeah. Which is, it's tough, like, because you want to try and find that line where like, how much can you bring it down where it's not reducing the value to the customer?
For sure. So to get into it, like, why would you do this?
Yeah.
And from like the Oppulo perspective, it's pretty straightforward. One, there's times where we launch a product with more expensive components than maybe are necessarily needed.
Mm-hmm.
It's really easy to just spend a buku bucks on really good linear rails.
Yeah.
But you might not necessarily need those, or like maybe they're top ground flat in a way that doesn't matter because you're mounting a print to it.
Sure. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Or they're rated for a much higher thrust load than the lumen can exert.
Sure. But that one was more, that's like using a sledgehammer to drive a brad nail, right? Like, I know for sure it's not going to be a problem to launch. And then once we get it out the door, we can think about, okay, well, in what ways can we cost this down later? It's like, it's a crutch.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I like to describe it as paying for unneeded quality. Like where maybe our component it's good at something we don't need.
Right. Yeah. That isn't even relevant to what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing about the why here is that cost down is also second sourcing.
Yeah. Which is a whole thing in and of itself.
It's really important to be able to get something from more than one place. I don't think you should ever let one vendor be too important to you. They don't deserve to have that power over you. Like we try to make it so a single vendor cannot shut us down.
Yep. And you know what? Companies go under. Companies have problems. Like we literally had a situation where we were trying to get packaging. Do you remember? I haven't thought about this in months. We were trying to get packaging for V2, V3 or something like that, or some version of the machine. And the entire factory that was making our packaging was flooded and everything was underwater. And it was like a 6-week, like the dye got rusty or something like that.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I did too until like just now. But that is a situation where, and you can't second source everything. You could, but it's like maybe it doesn't make sense to do it for everything.
Yeah.
But that was a situation where, man, it would have been really nice to have a second source for our packaging, because one literally went down because of a freak of nature 6-week delay flood.
Yeah, they were doing work on their roof, and a worker drilled into the sprinkler system.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember
Yeah,
this
$2 million of damage in 5 minutes.
That's a bad day at work.
I hope they were bonded and insured. But that could happen in any facility.
Yep.
So the great thing about cost downing a part is that it gives you a relationship at one or more companies where you could get it elsewhere.
Right. And I think we have. Do we have most things second sourced in the Lumen? I think we have almost everything. Maybe there's a couple exceptions, but like for the most part, we have a second source for effectively everything in the machine.
Definitely true. And with the rare exception, we're keenly aware of it. And it's like our first target for cost down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It is a risk vector. Like if one other organization or even one point of contact or person can decide, nope, you don't get to sell lumens anymore, that is a risk.
Yeah.
Like having a backup for that is so important. And like we dealt with this at Formlabs a lot too. There was like a whole group of people at Formlabs. Their whole thing was just second sourcing, cost down. It was like their whole bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And like for all you know, a vendor of yours could get bought by a competitor.
Yeah, that's true. That's a really good point. And then you're kind of SOL.
Yep.
Yeah.
So part of cost downing is like helping keep one vendor from being too powerful in your supply chain.
Yeah. Well, that also can get tricky because if you like, let's say you have vendor A, you buy a bunch of parts from vendor A, but then you switch to a cheaper vendor B. Well, now you're not maintaining the relationship with vendor A.
Mm-hmm.
So do you feather both of them and you have a little bit from each one? Or do you have to like in a situation where, you know, vendor B falls through, you have to be like, hey, remember me from like 18 months ago? Can I buy that part again? And like, that might be fine, but it also might not be.
Yeah, it's always precarious. Like there was a vendor we used to go to for everything.
Yeah.
Almost everything they sold. We bought GT2 hardware from them. We bought limit switches from them. We bought linear rails from them. We bought power supplies and CP40 equipment from them. And we ended up walking it back to just the CP40 stuff. And by the time I was messaging them for only that, I didn't know what they were going to say.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's tough. It's tough. You know, if you're switching vendors, like they can tell. This happened at Formlabs too. We were switching a vendor for a certain part. And I remember it was like a lot of the discussion about it when we were switching to a cheaper, different vendor for the part was like, how do we make it so that the original vendor is not going to be like, oh, I see you're reducing your volume. Like, what the hell's going on? Like, are you second sourcing it? Because you should be transparent with them. You know, they should know what's going on, but it's good to have a second source. It's a weird, delicate balance thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll get more into that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then the last reason I have down for why is like, costing down a product can free up capital and allow you to invest it more into other areas of the product or its supporting ecosystem.
Sure. Yeah.
If we save $20 on the Lumen Bomb, it doesn't just go into our pockets.
Yeah.
It goes into R&D, or it can go into putting more quality into something where like a component could be better based off customer reports.
Exactly. Like money is fuel.
Yeah.
And the more that you can hang on to, the more that you can use that, the better. Like if Opula were a lifestyle business where it's like, hey, we just want to sell enough machines to take a paycheck and then go home and do our thing, then yeah, sure. It's like we could give ourselves raises or whatever with that. But when you want to use it to continue to grow and use it as fuel to like make new things and solve other problems, it lets you grow. You know, you're making your thing more efficiently and it's freeing stuff up. Yeah,
exactly that. We have a fiduciary duty here to make the Lumen as efficiently as we can.
Right.
And a major component of that is reducing drivers of cost. That makes it critical to be looking at all components in our supply chain with an eye for like reducing cost.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
This is not a way of making the Lumen crappier and work the same.
Right.
Or work nearly as well. It's about keeping quality the same or better, but just shaving cost off.
The unneeded quality, like you said. And this goes with, I'm sure you're talking about this later of like, once we pick another part we're potentially costing down, we're validating the snot.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, we're checking to make sure that there is no regression.
Yep.
You know, it has to do it without doing that, but we'll get to that later.
I reiterated on this again later too, but this is not a process to rush.
Yes.
Like
you're already shipping your hardware. You're good.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't have to happen immediately.
Yeah. So like, don't screw with the fact you have production uptime. Like,
yeah.
Keep this cool, calm, collected. Like follow these steps. Rushing this can be more expensive than the cost down.
Yeah. You should be so sure before you roll in one of these optimizations. If you're already shipping a thing that works and is fine and is all that good, but you could be making a little more money on it, it's way more important to make sure you don't introduce your aggression than it is that you start saving $1.50 every machine. It's like, it's not worth the risk. You have to be so sure. It's a late game optimization is kind of how I think about it.
Yeah. I got burned on that thinking we could switch away from inserted hex nuts in areas and go to self-tapping screws.
Mm-hmm.
I'm yet to find a self-tapping screw with a button head that doesn't strip instantly.
Yep.
I'd already updated the print farm.
Yep.
I'd already updated our PLM. Did you assume this worked?
Yep.
Nope.
You got rubber footed.
Yeah. That's one for later.
That's one for later.
So I think generally we've touched on like the why.
Mm-hmm.
And now it'd be cool to touch on like deciding what to pick.
Yeah.
I had 2 notes here, and I'm sure we'll come up from more in our conversation. But first, we look at like the top drivers of BOM cost and see which of those just feels like it could be cheaper.
Right.
It sounds a little bit like basic, but probably 50% of your costs come from your 10% of your most expensive items.
Yep. It's that Pareto rule.
Yep.
You know? Yeah. Yeah. I think that's true. And there are some things that like you might have a couple of items that are really expensive, and there's just not too much you can do to cost those down. Maybe the most expensive thing is already pretty well costed down. It's not necessarily just a function of how expensive it is, but it's how much less expensive could it be?
And a reminder there of like, remember to look at it in terms of the usage per product times unit price.
Right. Yeah. Because if like a CP40 holder, for example, costs whatever it does, but if you have 2 of them per machine, same with nozzles. If a nozzle doesn't seem like it's that expensive, but then you have 6 per machine, well,
Really
you're
adds up.
6xing the price of that, you know?
Yeah. Like extrusion, if they're $10 a piece, there's 6 of them in the machine.
Right.
That's one of the most expensive things.
Yeah. 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 100%.
Yeah, have an eye for like what are your top drivers of BOM cost, and like start with those.
Yep.
Once you've exhausted those, work your way down the list.
Sure.
And like regularly assess that for sure.
Yep.
So yeah, we focus definitely on our like top drivers of cost. I'd say we don't focus too much on our like generic commodity items.
Right.
With the whole process we're about to describe.
Yeah.
Because generally like a nut or a bolt or a capacitor, vinyl tube, it's just going to be quicker to buy more at once.
Yeah. And it's probably like they're so inexpensive. And even if you can save 50% on it, we're talking about the difference between like 70 cents or 35 cents.
Yeah.
Like, is that really worth it? The percentage isn't really the driver. What we care about is how much total dollar per machine. How does that change the profit margin? How do we reduce the COGS? That's really the metric that we care about.
Yeah. And like, even if I know I could save a penny per bolt.
Yeah.
If I know there's a $15 cost down possible on the packaging.
Right.
I don't care about the bolt.
Yep. Exactly. And like, how much does your NRE, non-recurring engineering time of finding that vendor, negotiating with them, getting them set up, doing the QC on the new stuff, learning how they work, blah, 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 blah. How long would that 1 cent per bolt take to amortize your time?
Yeah.
It's like, it has to be, your quantity has to be really large. Like at Apple, they make enough that 1 cent per bolt is like many millions of dollars. Yeah. But for us, it's like, doesn't matter. It's not worth your time to do that for that small of a cost down.
For sure. Yeah. Consider like what your volume is, what your retail price of the product is, like how important is reducing cost to you, and like gauge how much of your BOM is up for grabs here based off that.
Sure. Yep.
If you have a BOM cost of $20 for a thing you sell for $2,000, maybe you should spend your time getting more sales.
Yeah, you're doing just fine there on your profit margin. You're doing disgustingly, insanely fine on your profit margin. Stop listening to this episode.
Yeah, like, we are not that blessed.
What could that even be? That's such an absurd product that it costs $20 to make. I mean, it's like that horseshoe crab blood.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's like it's worth so much, but that's
probably a whole rigmarole to get the blood.
You're right. It's probably more expensive than $20 for that. But you know, something like that. It's like some obscene.
There's plenty of niches like that.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to think of some.
Yeah. Me too. That's a weird thing.
In our Discord, let us know what the most offensive margins in manufactured products might be.
You know what it is? It's a George Clooney signature. Because he buys a pen and he spends a little bit of his time and it's worth a freaking ton of money. You know what I mean? It's like fame does that. Yeah. I think that's the only thing that gets that kind of profit margin.
I bet cigarettes are up there, but not in the 1000%.
Yeah, I don't know. That's crazy.
But in any way, look for where the juice is worth the squeeze. Like
Yeah.
The low-hanging fruits are valid things to go after, but don't put out the candle when there's a house fire. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Like,
That's another one.
Yeah.
That's another one for the books. Don't
Yeah.
put out a candle when there's a house.
yeah, like, I don't know.
That's good.
I hope y'all see what I'm getting at here.
Yeah. There, when you look at your costed cogs, things will jump out to you. And actually, there's even this trick in Google Sheets or Excel where you can make the cell color of a certain column be colored based on how big the value is or like what percentage it is from the sum or something like that.
Yeah.
So you can literally make it so that it will be red if it's a high percentage of your cogs. And you just try and get all those reds down to yellows or greens. You know, it shows you the intensity of how expensive it is.
Yeah, that's actually what I did when everything was spreadsheet managed.
Yeah.
I should do that again.
It'd be cool.
It's handy.
Yeah. I wish Aligny had that feature. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. Hey, Aligny does.
Yeah, no kidding, huh?
But that's like deciding what to pick. One more tangent on that is shipping cost here matters too.
Yeah, and duties and all that stuff.
Maybe you can find a domestic vendor where the unit cost of the component is a little bit more expensive, but you're not paying import duties or like sea freight on it.
Yeah,
That's the thing to be considering here as well.
sure. Would you say that there's a value in like if we have a domestic vendor that's more expensive, but we can be like, hey, I need 300 of these. And they're like, bet you'll see it in 2 days. And it shows up 2 days later. But with like most of our overseas vendors, you know, there's like a week or two processing time. It takes a week, even over air. Sometimes it takes like a week to come in. There's some value in getting it next day, but also that value is kind of obfuscate. Like the reason that's valuable is because we weren't planning ahead on production ordering. You know what I mean? It's like kind of a fake value add. You should just not be needing something last minute. You know what I mean?
It depends on how complicated the item is. A lot of manufacturing shops in at least America are not that quick turn or versatile. Like if we went to the MakerBot sheet metal supplier, MakerBot used to have this New Jersey sheet metal supplier. And I have to imagine if you talk to them, they're going to say 12-week lead time on anything.
Right.
I actually went to them for staging plates once, and
They told you to pound sand.
they said this crazy price and 12-week lead time.
Yeah.
I saw that so often when I was looking to do as much of the lumen domestically as we could.
Interesting. So it's even shipping it overseas, it's still faster in a lot of instances.
I think it can be faster and cheaper.
Right.
A lot of the time.
Yeah.
I hate to say it as someone who's a huge advocate for domestic manufacturing, but a lot of the time it's just not there.
Yep.
Like find me a NEMA 17 stepper motor in the US. I'll wait.
Yeah. You can't really find them.
Yeah, it'd be impossible to make a lumen fully domestic.
Yeah, probably, huh?
So,
Well, I mean, even just think about STM chips, like they're made at TSMC,
yeah.
you know, like
So-
you can't.
I lean on domestic more for having a second source or paying for premium white glove expedite service in the event of manufacturing like supply chain disruption.
Right.
That's really where I find the landscape lies.
Right. You can kind of second source a lot of quick turn like brass machine parts or something like that. You can get those made at a machine shop with, you know, a buddy who has like a Swiss lathe and like, you know, knows his stuff.
Yeah.
You can get a lot of parts made next day as like as a stopgap. So you can almost kind of cost down just by a lot of parts by having a good relationship with a prototyping shop that can
Yeah.
like help be a stopgap for parts too.
I completely agree. What I'll also say on the domestic stuff is there's a lot of incredible shops out there
Mhm.
that you'll learn about through referrals, like places that'll make all of my notions on like abroad manufacturing capabilities feel wrong.
Yeah.
Like you can get some incredible shops. They're found through word of mouth. They have a crappy website,
Yep.
and your work will be important to them. It
Right.
can be done quickly. Like that is out there.
Yeah.
It's just hard to find.
Yeah. Your buddy Brad has one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great
He's
shop.
a great shop.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's,
Factory Amsterdam.
yeah. They're great.
Mhm.
They're great. Yeah. You just got to find them.
If you can find them, then heck yeah.
Do it up.
So now we've described like what to pick. It's really about like, okay, so how do you do it? Right.
Right.
Like, and that means you need to gather like all the information to describe your part.
Mhm.
If you don't have the drawing of your part or the specs or your QC requirements, you can't ask anyone for it.
Exactly. And you probably should have a lot of these things already because you had to go through this process the first time when you were getting your first vendor. But also, maybe you don't. Maybe you said to the vendor, hey, I need XYZ. And they just gave you a motor or whatever it is. And you tested it and it works. And you don't have the specs for it, which is like not the correct way to go about doing it. But it does happen.
Yeah, I get burned by that occasionally where like I'm not positive if the most up-to-date drawing I have on hand includes the red line feedback I gave them in an email chain.
Right. Yeah.
They're like, grab your drawings, make sure they're up to date,
Mhm.
compare them against like your very last conversation about the design with your current vendor.
Yep.
Make sure it's the right thing.
Yep.
Because you don't want to buy 10,000 motors of the wrong type.
Yeah, that's not good.
But yeah, when you have that information in hand, you can go shopping. It's a real fun part.
Yep.
Really, that looks like a lot of Alibaba browsing. Talking to as many people as you can, many as you have time for, sharing the drawings. I have a copy-pasted message, like Mad Lib style.
Yep.
Here's this part. Here's our quantities. Here's our desired lead times. Price break to target.
Yep.
And here's the attached files.
Can you do it?
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'll send that to like 10, 20 shops.
Yeah. You'll also send it to existing vendors.
Yep.
Like you'll be like, hey, can you're doing XYZ for us already. Can you do this part too? And sometimes they're like, yeah, no problem. So like you might even already have a vendor that you can lean on for that, which is
for sure.
Can be risky because now you are second sourcing it for that part, but you're putting more eggs in the basket of that vendor.
Mm-hmm.
So if that vendor has a problem, well, you still have everything second sourced, but you're betting on one horse there instead of diversifying your parts.
Yeah, and if you have a good relationship and good faith that shop's not going anywhere, that sales rep is loyal to you, then maybe it's fine.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Like trust but verify comes to mind here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, you can trust them, but understand like why you trust them.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Have you seen consistent work from them in the past? Do you know that they're doing just fine as an organization? They're not going anywhere. They're good things to know if you're putting eggs in that basket.
Yeah.
Yep.
We've had a lot of trouble with vendors at our current shops, like losing our like account manager.
Right.
It basically makes a previous vendor be like a new company to us.
Right. Yeah. All from scratch again, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you lose that relationship. Your point of contact somewhere, and like you're new to them.
Yep. Yeah.
Just keep that in mind when talking to places, and look at the reviews they got.
Yeah. Yep. Pretty much.
I love going to an Alibaba shop or a company on Alibaba and seeing like, oh, they make cable harnesses for MRI machines. They're gonna do what I need. No brainer, no question.
Yep. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Oh, they can make knockoff wiring harnesses or replacement wiring harnesses for McLaren.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna be just fine.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Like they know what they know what they're doing.
Yeah. The trick is to feather it so that they don't look at us and be like, that's chump change. We only do big, crazy, wacky harnesses. Like you got to feather it so that you're big enough that they care about your contract,
Mm-hmm.
but not that they're so big that they don't give a crap about you.
For sure. I'll also say on this note that it can be lucrative to find a vendor and ask them to do something that they don't usually do.
Yeah.
An example we'll touch on more later, like a shaft collar company. Turns out they have the machines on hand to make something much more complicated than a simple shaft collar.
Yeah.
But they'll still charge shaft collar prices.
Right. Yeah.
So think about that there too.
Yeah.
That worked really well for Formlabs. We shouldn't get into too much specifics, but
Yeah.
turns out if you can make one thing, you can make something similar.
Yeah. Yes, that is very true. Yeah, it's good to ask. On the other side of that email is a person who's looking at a factory line and goes, maybe we could swing that. It's not like it's such a rigid, we only do shaft collars of this dimension to that dimension. ID this. It's not like that. It's like if you have enough work for them and you have a big enough contract, they might buy a machine to help facilitate that. That's happened before.
Yep.
Where our vendors have been like, oh, this is a pretty big contract. And then they buy equipment to help facilitate our order volume. Like, they're down to clown. They're your partner in it. So, like, can't hurt to ask.
And that's how we got our bulk kit bagging service. When we were making the fastener kit bags for the V2 kit.
Yeah.
It was 17 different bolt bags in a greater bag.
Yeah.
And they'd never done something like that before, but because they just priced it in terms of like labor and the margin on their labor, it was really cheap.
Yep. Yeah. Depending on what the contract is, like you might actually pay for their machine to do the contract, and like maybe they don't amortize the entire price of it into that one contract, but if they expect, you'll be making that same kind of purchase 3 times a year, something like that, they know that it's going to pay for itself over the course of a period of time. So you might help that factory gain that new skill or something like that. It might be the first time they're doing it, so it's a little bit of a risk. It's not someone that, is tried and true, but you're taking a chance on each other. Yeah,
entirely true. Sometimes an inquiry about a product or service that they don't currently offer but would like to is enough for them to use this as a guinea pig and try a kitting service.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like, maybe they'll buy a counting scale that costs $1,000 and amortize like $200 of it on our order. But we're that little push to get them to do something new.
Yep. And you can also get a FAI, a first article inspection. So like you get samples sent over and you check them. You can structure it such that you're not signing up for this huge thing if they're trying it for the first time. You can still kind of audit it and be like, well, this isn't quite. And this has happened to us before where we like got sample parts. They were not good. And we're like, nah, we can't do this. Like, this is not going to work for us.
I think a lot of people are really quick to fault overseas manufacturing for being like low quality when it's actually our job as when we're wearing that sourcing engineer hat to clearly define what's needed of them for quality metrics. Totally. And like it's our jobs here to set up these shops for success and for them to understand what they need to make.
Exactly.
And I've found them so receptive to like quality constraints, quality feedback. I've had so many shops like ask for QC fixtures to be sent so they can use it because these shops take so much pride in their work. They want to make the right thing.
Totally. And that's the beauty of it is like they will provide the quality that you ask for. If you don't ask for the right level of quality, well, that's your fault. If you ask them to do it to a certain standard, they'll do it to that standard. It's like, I really don't like that perspective of like, oh, it's overseas. It's not. That's wrong. Yeah. That is such a incorrect take. Like some incredible, beautiful work comes from overseas.
Yep.
Yeah. The lumen does not exist without many other countries. Like you just said, you can't make a lumen in America only. You need all the other countries of the world. You need the resources and support and the infrastructure of all these other places to make something like this happen. Like it's a global effort to make it happen. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's why like we welcome all these international vendors of ours. Like it's inevitable that you have to work with them.
Yeah.
Like, don't be begrudging about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're great. They're great to work with. Before we continue, we'd like to thank this episode's sponsor, PCBWay. We love using PCBWay for getting prototype boards in really, really quick with really excellent quality. It's fantastic using them when we're trying to iterate through something really quick. There's an entire team of engineers that checks over your design, and they have caught some silly mistakes of mine before I order boards, which has saved us weeks of production time. And we can just do a really quick iteration every week if we need to get boards in. PCBWay is a fantastic service to get boards made quickly and effectively if you need boards really quick. Thank you so much to PCBWay for sponsoring this episode.
Well, going shopping and shopping around is one lens you can look at a cost down. Another whole one is, can we make it instead?
Yeah.
Is an item in your supply chain worth taking in-house?
Yeah.
The answer may surprise you. Clickbait.
Dentists hate this one weird trick. Well, and not even taking it in-house necessarily, but like if you're buying something off the shelf, maybe you can get those parts manufactured. Like you're buying a subassembly and it's like, I don't know, some widget. Let's just say a fidget spinner, for example. Let's say you need a fidget spinner in your product for whatever godforsaken reason, and you're buying off-the-shelf fidget spinners. It might be cheaper to get the bearing and the centerpiece and the weights on the outside and the frame all made and machined separately and assembled in-house or assembled at another facility and then importing that custom-made fidget spinner.
Yeah.
Instead of just buying an off-the-shelf fidget spinner. Like you're still getting the same thing, but you are now, you're opening up that black box of, I just need a fidget spinner, and you're figuring out how the sausage is made and you're making your own. And sometimes that's way cheaper. It's more to think about, but you could save a lot of money by cutting out the middleman effectively and being your own fidget spinner manufacturer,
Yeah. There's plenty of products in the supply chain that are a pain in the butt to make. The vendors put a healthy margin on them because they are a pain in the butt to make.
Yeah.
But, so yeah, consider highly whether it's worth taking something in-house yourself.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't recommend you 3D print drag chain, but
yeah. But if you can and it's cheaper and the numbers check out, maybe 3D print your drag chain. I mean, I hesitate to even say that because I think that's a great example of something you shouldn't take in-house. Like get an off-the-shelf drag chain that's just good and don't worry about that. But there might be things like that where it's like, yeah, I could, or maybe you get your own injection molded, drag chain. You have to be a pretty high volume for this, but you get your own drag chain designed, maybe you need a really weird shaped drag chain and like just injection molding and having a facility make it for you, assemble them for you is way better.
You never know until you look into it.
Yep. Got to run those numbers.
Yeah. So be skeptical of everything you pay for on your bomb. Like look at like what it'd mean to do it yourself.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yep.
It's always, you'll be surprised.
Yeah.
You have to be a pretty high volume to warrant buying a CNC machine, but Apple buys thousands of mills at a time.
Yeah. Or like, do you outsource the mill? You have someone else mill the part for you. Do you bring the actual milling in house? Do you buy a pre-milled thing, or do you hire a plate, like a machine shop to do the milling? Like, there's a lot of different ways to get to Oz there.
Just keep this in mind as the thing you can do.
Yeah.
But let's say you're going to spend money with a vendor and just buy the thing. The next step would be to collect quotes.
Yep.
And when we get our quotes in from vendors, I just make a simple little plot where it's purchase price compared to purchase volume.
Yep.
So I look and see, like, how does this vendor's price diminish over time as volume increases?
Yep.
And I plot that against all the other vendors, keeping in mind unit price and shipping cost. And it makes a really good way to compare them all against each other.
Yeah.
You can tell which vendors weren't taking you seriously pretty quickly.
Yeah. And it's great to see if, like, is one way better suited for a smaller volume? Like, are we chump change to them? Like, if you see their price breaks reflect that you're usually used to working with people that are way bigger or way smaller than us, you start to see that in that graph. You know, it helps calibrate you a little bit too.
Yeah. From there, you can use that data and either go back to some of those higher priced vendors and see if they want to match.
Mm-hmm.
You have a good reality check in hand. You can try using it, see what happens.
Yep.
But let's say that's not receptive. You just pick your three to five of those sources from your data collection and reach out to them for samples.
Yep.
Like we said earlier, you don't want to rush into any of this.
Yep.
So samples are imperative. You want to make sure they pass. The same like scrutinous validation your original part went under.
Yep. You are buying a cheaper thing and you are trying to replace it with a more expensive thing. You should be so effing careful in that process. Why is it cheaper? You know, it's like the GD&T of sourcing. You're trying to only get quality right where you want it.
You misspoke.
What'd I say?
You said you were buying a cheaper thing and replacing it with a more expensive thing.
Thank you. Thank you. You are buying a cheaper thing and you are replacing a more expensive thing with it. Thank you. See, that's the way you interrupt a podcast co-host. That's what you do it, not just, yeah, whatever, Steven.
That was a nuance. I was like, did he actually say that?
You clown. Yeah, thank you. Thank
you.
You. You need to get samples. You need to validate that part. There is something that is worse about that part that you're getting, probably, unless your original source is just gutting you or something.
Which happens.
There is something about it that is lesser. It just has to be, right? It's less expensive. Like, what about it? What makes it less expensive? You need to find that out. That's your challenge, is finding out, why is this cheaper? And it can only be worse in a way that doesn't matter for your product.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, good example of this is like, let's say our vacuum pumps for the Lumen, they can do both pneumatics and hydraulics. And maybe it costs an extra $3 for the pump because it can also handle water or something like that. Let's just say, usually the other way around, but let's just say, why would we pay that extra $3? We're not pumping fluids. We're not pouring shots with the Lumen. Like, it doesn't matter. We only need pneumatics. That does not degrade the quality of the machine at all. It's quality we don't need. So once we get it in, okay, they say this one can't do hydraulics, but it can do pneumatics. Do we see a reduction? Do we see a change? This is not a real example, but like, why? Why is it less? It has to be acceptable. You have to understand exactly why it's less expensive in a way that does not impact you.
Mm-hmm. And maybe the pump is just louder. The bearings in it aren't as good.
Right. Yeah.
Decide how much you care.
Yep. I was going to say, check the PRD.
Yeah.
Do your customers not care about the loudness of the pumps? Let it be louder. If they don't give a crap, if they do care, that's not an acceptable regression. What matters to check your PRD as you are going through this? Like, any regression needs to not violate. You still need to fulfill your PRD as you're going through this. Are you still making the thing you set out to make?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, maybe, like, for our sake, a 3D print can be changed slightly to handle a more varying dimension of a cheaper part.
Right.
And that doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Let's say our Z-axis linear rails are sometimes longer.
Yeah.
That's probably fine.
It literally doesn't matter for us. Yeah. Like, it doesn't matter. We restrain it in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have to pay an extra $1 per rail so someone is cutting it to a plus or minus 0.1 millimeter precision. That doesn't matter for us. We can have plus or minus a millimeter, and it doesn't affect the function of the machine at all.
Yep.
It really doesn't. That's a silly place to spend money.
Yeah. So validate the snot out of your samples. And from there, pick your favorite.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that goes into picking your favorite.
Yeah.
I must have said this before on a YouTube video because it feels deja vu to me. But the metrics I see here are like the overall price of the product,
Mhm.
So unit price and shipping.
Yep.
Evaluate what shipping costs are for that vendor. Maybe they have a dog crap. maybe they have a horrible shipping account with FedEx or UPS, and
Right.
it's expensive for them to get anything to you.
Sure.
Maybe look at their lead times. Is this vendor able to get you stuff 1 week turnaround for anything, or they need 3 months?
Yep.
Decide how that's important to you.
Yep.
Communication. Do they speak your native language well?
Mhm.
Do they speak your native language at all?
Yep.
Do they understand Google translated messages you send them well?
Yeah. Is communication fluid?
Yeah.
Because this is a social task, is like talking with your vendor.
Yeah.
And if you can't communicate with them well, there's going to be miscommunication.
Yeah, it boils down to, do you enjoy talking to them? And like, I have vendors where there's no common language and we have a great time chatting each other up on WeChat.
Yeah.
It's fun. But some vendors can make that not pleasant. And
Yes.
like that costs you time.
Yeah.
It's not worth getting aggravated to go with a cheaper vendor.
It's not. Yeah. Yeah. It's better to pay a little more and make sure things go smoothly.
It's also another way of saying like, you like working with them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
The other two metrics I had here were like, do you feel like this vendor values your business?
Like in terms of the money that you provide.
In terms of
For them.
money, or like, do they believe in supporting your company?
Mm-hmm.
If a vendor doesn't care about you ordering again, I like to have people be excited to work with us.
Yep.
I like them to care about our success.
Yep.
If a vendor doesn't care about whether we place another order with them or not, I'm always wary of whether or not they'll be there when we something rushed or when we have a quality issue.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. They should be your partner.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's always it's a two-way relationship, and if it feels one-sided, like maybe it's not worth it if they're the cheapest.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good point.
And then lastly is reliability. And that's in terms of like product quality, communication, like responsiveness, how consistent were they across beginning to end of that like sampling process.
Yeah. Do they take QC issues seriously? Because like there's been times where we've been like, hey, check out this problem. And we don't get a great response.
Yeah.
Like they need to take it seriously. Like we're trying to make something good. And like if they're just like whatever, that is not, you shouldn't be working with those people.
We'll sound crazy for going to this, but it's a funny anecdote. We had an extrusion vendor we were trying to sample with for the BYOP kit.
Oh yeah. I remember this. Oh, that was so funny.
Yeah. They sent us the wrong extrusion twice in a row. And the woman I was working with, I think her name was Joyce, was like, no, that's impossible. What do you mean? And I showed her a picture. I sent her a video of me unboxing the box.
Yeah, we were trying to get 2020 V slot and we got 2060.
Yeah, consistently.
I still have like 200 pounds of 2060 extrusion in my garage.
Yeah.
There's so much of it. And we were like, this isn't what we ordered. And she's like, no way. There's no way. And we showed the video and she's like, what? Like, she's freaking out about it.
And we caught it because we noticed that they were billing us for 2060.
Yeah.
Like 2020 was remapped in their warehouse to something else.
Yeah. Yeah. It was so funny. But they took it seriously.
Yeah, they took it seriously. They had a genuine problem. They were responsive through the issue. They sent us the right stuff at the end, probably at their large cost.
Yep.
Surely they were not reliable to start.
Yeah.
But they didn't just ghost us.
They fixed it.
They fixed it.
Yeah. And like, that's huge.
I care about that. That makes me like them more.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. 100%.
I'd rather see a mistake and know how they handled it than like have them be perfect so far.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because what you're getting there is trust.
Yeah.
Like it could be that they just happen to be getting lucky for a while. But if you watch something bad happen and then you see them being responsive, it's like, you know, they're gonna fix it.
Yep.
That's huge. That matters so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And oh, the poor thing. I remember when you sent her the message the second time that issue happened, you were like, oh man, I'm going to just nuke her whole day. I feel so bad. And her reaction on WeChat, she was like, no, cry face. Like she didn't understand why.
At least 10 crying emojis.
It was so sad, but they fixed it. They figured it out and it was all good. You know, we got it sorted.
Yeah.
That was really funny. I forgot about that.
Sometimes it's worth, you guys should know that can be the case that the sales engineer you're working with doesn't touch or see your product. And that's just how it might be.
Yeah. There's some communication thing on their side where they just aren't getting the right thing or whatever. It's like, it's not their fault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously do better, please. But
yeah. Yeah. But you know, be understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reliability is the last one there.
Poor Joyce.
Oh yeah.
Poor thing.
I miss her. We ended up going elsewhere for other reasons, but
yeah.
She was good for the initial run.
Yeah, she was great. she was good.
From this point here, you should have a relationship with a cost down second source that you're able to turn on if you so choose.
Mhm.
But before proceeding it is actually kind of worth having a conversation with your original vendor, showing them like, hey, I have this, I'm ready to start ordering elsewhere for this rate.
Mhm.
Can you beat it?
Yeah.
'Cause then you're going to get something you already trust at a cheaper rate,
Right.
with someone you already have a rapport with. That has validity to it.
Sure.
And you can keep the second source cost down as just another thing you have in the back pocket.
Right. Yep.
It's easier to just keep getting the same thing for cheaper.
It is. Yeah. If you can not disrupt where it's coming from, but you have a vendor in the pocket at that rate, that's fantastic.
So like alongside like shopping for other vendors, it could be worth having an early conversation with your current vendors about trying to get these things cheaper.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times there's room for them to do that. It is worth it for them to keep your business by making you happy.
Yeah.
And I've usually found that something can always be cheaper.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the times these factories are putting a surcharge on the hassle of working with someone abroad.
Yeah.
And it leaves a lot of cost they can whittle away.
Yeah.
Because maybe they realize you're easy to work with,
Mhm.
or it's the setup NRE of that relationship is over.
Yeah. Yeah. And now that they've validated that you're like a good vendor, maybe they'll cut you a little break.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or
Exactly.
a good client, I should say.
For sure. Or like you can offer to handle the customs process and by handing them shipping labels that are all sorted.
Sure.
Like, maybe you can just make it easier for a current vendor and they can lower your price.
Yeah.
All sorts of stuff you can do like that.
Oh yeah. What we didn't talk about was that time you said to a vendor, the price of gold has gone down. Why isn't this cheaper? Because it was like the gold plating on a PCB or something. And they're like, okay, yeah. So like you can also just negotiate. Like that's also a valid cost down tactic.
I felt like I was like raking them over coals for cents.
But they were trying to raise the price.
Yeah.
And you were like, but the price the cost for materials has gone down.
Mhm.
And then they were receptive to that. Like, I think that's valid. You were just kind of bringing up a point and then they conceded, you know?
Yep.
I think it was fine.
There should be a whole episode on negotiation too, with like a t-shirt someone brought on.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Yeah. Everything is a conversation. Everything's a negotiation. It never hurts to ask. The word of caution here is just that you don't want to spook your current vendor. If they're the only place you could buy something currently, maybe tread cautiously.
Yeah. They have a corner on the market of that part for you. And you want to make sure that you preserve that more than anything. And that's why it can be good to have this conversation maybe after you have a competing quote, because there's some validity behind that. But then, it depends on the vendor. It depends on the relationship. It depends on how big they are, how important is the contract to them, all that kind of stuff. So you kind of just have to, figure it out really, based on vibes.
Yeah. This kind of goes out the window a little bit too when we're talking about a production source that you don't talk to. Maybe one of your sources is an AliExpress listing.
Right. Yeah.
Like there's no real relationship there. It's just this one's cheaper.
Yeah. And it's always better if you can get the AliExpress listing, if you can reach out to them and have a conversation and like a, communication with them, it's good to.
Yeah.
But, like for some things, like, we get a bunch of ESD tweezers for our kits. There's no reason to communicate with the vendor for that. Like we buy a ton of them. We validated them to start. It's realistically just coming from a company. It's an off the shelf thing. Effectively, they know how to make it. They're good. Yeah. If we ever have a problem, we just find a different vendor. We have plenty of them in stock. That we don't have to worry about like stocking out of them. Like there's no reason to establish that relationship.
Intrinsically, the tweezers would cost more if they spoke to us.
What do you mean?
There's no sales engineer we're interfacing with. And like that guy has salary they have to pay.
Right. Yeah. It's cheaper for them to make the tweezers if they don't have to have someone talking to us about the tweezers.
Yeah.
If we can just buy it, that saves the money and it makes tweezers cheaper for us. And you know what? They're just a solved problem. There's no, build a better mousetrap. Tweezers are just tweezers. That we know how to make tweezers, There's no validation there aside from we get them in and we go, can this pick up a part? Are they not crappily made? Yeah, they're good. Ship it.
Do they bounce back when squeezed?
Can they pick up an 0402 part?
Yeah.
That's our validation.
Yeah. So it's all to say, you can negotiate with your current vendors here and like, don't be afraid of the faceless ones.
Yeah.
But yeah. And then there's other avenues like, can you make it instead?
Yeah.
Now we can get into examples.
Sweet.
A really fun example of a cost down initiative is the nozzle holder for the Lumen PMP.
Yeah.
The nozzle holder for the Lumen PMP was previously an off-the-shelf item, an industry standard component even, that was really expensive and hard to find.
Yeah, it was hard to source.
Yeah, if you were an independent builder looking for one, you'd be spending upwards of $25 for this thing.
Yeah.
And like we didn't do much better than that ourselves as like sourcing engineers here.
Yeah.
So with there being 2 of these per lumen, it was pretty upsetting to have to spend so much money for like
a bit of brass.
Yeah, like 30 grams of brass.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, we just knew based off the price of brass, the cost of a spring, what it would cost to create that on a lathe. Like we knew there was a crazy markup on that component.
Yeah. Even with like labor, assembly time, all that stuff, like it's insane cost down potential right there.
So it showed to us that after trying to get the same thing cheaper, it wasn't really that possible.
Yeah.
While there were many vendors for the nozzle holder online, like they probably are all coming from one of 3 places.
Yeah.
There was a high floor on the possible prices we could get.
Sure.
And again, it was 30 grams of brass, if that. So what we decided to do was to make our own.
And it's great.
Yeah. And it's funny, like we leaned on our brass shaft collar vendor to just make them.
Yeah. We already had a brass guy.
Yeah.
Effectively. And we're like, hey, what about this? And like, that's their bread and butter.
Yeah. They use a Swiss lathe to make shaft collars. The Swiss lathe doesn't really care what shape it's making. It's just going to poop out thousands of a part an hour.
Right. Yeah. So like, that's a great example of like, is kind of doing it ourselves worthwhile? It's like the same kind of thing as we chose to injection mold our own cable chain here.
Yeah.
Because it was way cheaper to make our own cable chain than it was to buy off the shelf cable chain.
What we experienced was that we now have more control over the quality of that component.
Yeah, true.
We aren't reliant on this part being available anymore.
Yeah, we found a different way to do it.
And we're saving money.
Yeah.
It's funny too, because it's so profoundly cheaper that it's like worth even the labor cost to build it. And it sometimes the 2 pieces of brass don't fit together. So like we have a little bit of fallout and that's still cheaper.
Yep. It paid for your NRE so quickly. Well, not so quickly. We're probably still paying it off, but it's still not bad. It will start showing it in like probably the next couple months or something.
Yeah,
like
put a number to it, saving us hundreds of dollars a month.
Sure. Yeah.
Well worth it for us. It was a great win.
Yeah. It was a good win.
And it gives our team experience doing like a really high precision mechanical assembly task.
Yep. We're growing as an organization by taking on something like that. And we're not machining it ourselves, but we're doing the assembly, we're doing the QC, like it's a good balance there.
I even built a really cool jig for inserting the dowel pin out of a $7,000 crimping arbor press I got for $100 on eBay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I owe y'all some photos of that, maybe a video.
That thing is insane. I love that jig.
Thank you.
It's so wacky.
The nozzle holders is one we're pretty proud of. This was a great one in that it was a win for us as a cost down, but also a major win for the open hardware community because it was the first time there's an open source nozzle holder for pick and place machines.
Yeah, there's a lot of benefits to doing it. It's second sourcing it. It's a lot of benefits from that move.
Yeah. It wasn't without inspiration from some like really cool nozzle holder concepts in the OpenPMP Google group.
Yeah.
Those guys are awesome.
Yeah.
I took a lot of reference from there. But this is the first time there's one that's like commercially available and open.
Yep.
In a much more major way.
Yeah. It's cool.
Another good example of a cost down for us was the NEMA 17.
Yes.
NEMA 17 stepper motor is a very commodity item.
Yeah.
I get 10 emails a week from motor vendors asking if I want to buy NEMA 17 from them. And sometimes I say sure and ask for pricing and samples.
Yeah.
And eventually we found one that stuck.
Yeah.
They wanted to shave a couple bucks off the unit cost and they offered us a shipping rate that saved thousands of dollars per year.
Yeah.
But I thought it'd be great if Steven told us a little bit about validating that.
Yeah. When we got them in, we have to make sure that they're not going to be a regression, right? Same kind of thing. And we should really do an episode on validation as its own thing, because that's like a whole topic in and of itself. And because it's a commodity, you'd hope that it wouldn't introduce a regression. It's just such a standard thing, like an M3 by 10 bolt. But you can't, especially with something that's so important, like it's linear motion, you can't risk it. Yeah. So I set up a lifetime test on a Lumen. I just had it move a whole bunch, check. It's actually very similar to one that we did years ago. I just modified an existing script that we already had. And we effectively ran them hard and hot for like weeks. We really had no expectation it was going to be a problem. It was also from a vendor that we worked with before. We know, we love, we've seen other people use parts from them. Like there wasn't really a concern. You still have to go through the motions and do this checking. And we ran it for effectively, like, I forget exactly what method, I have to look at the document, but we looked at like, what's the reasonable lifetime of like aggressive use for Lumen over the course of like 5 years? I mean, like tripled it or something. Like it was like an insane metric just to be sure. It can't hurt, especially if it's a passive thing. And this is inherently a thing that can take time, is doing a cost down. We just set Illumina up in a corner and we just let it run. And then we check in on it once a week and it's just, whipping around, doing all its stuff. It's good after that period of time. You're Gucci.
We also made sure to check that this motor didn't put a lower ceiling on the max speed of the lumen, even past like what our current firmware let the lumen do for travel speed. Like we wanted to make sure that this wasn't going to be a different bottleneck for speed than what we were previously shipping.
Exactly. So, there was a lot of things that went into that. But then, once we got them all validated and stuff, it was good.
Yeah.
Made the switch. They're great. Mm-hmm. I'm glad we made that switch.
We did a control lot where half the lumens in a build were made out of this cost down NEMA 17. And even when I closely watched for fallout at our Gundam test stations, and everything passed to flying colors, everything passed our validation test earlier. And it was a success.
Yeah.
We use those cost down NEMA 17s indefinitely now.
Yeah. Easing them in is an interesting angle too. It's like once you do your validation and you're like still sure they're there, it can't hurt to like slowly introduce them. Because if you make a hard switch over, you're really committing to that. But if you trickle in just a few at a time and you see how they do in the field as well, like, and it's very important to say, this is not testing your customers. You have already tested it.
Yeah.
You have validated this part. It's like maybe you messed up and you didn't catch something, right? And there's something in there. There's something about this thing that wasn't representative. You don't want to switch everything over immediately. And this also can work really well with kind of feathering your stock. If you still have some existing stock of the original part, you can kind of slowly bring that one down as you bring up the other one as well. So it can kind of help with like using up your old stock as well.
Towards that, actually, I'm glad you mentioned it because it's important to say that a cost down isn't a cost down if you're scrapping half of your currently used item to switch over to the new thing.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You need to plan the cut in kind of delicately.
Yeah.
And it can be hard too because you don't want the cost down to be second source to feel rushed.
Yes. If you're like, oh no, we're running out of source 1, it's time to place an order, but we're halfway through validating source 2. It's always better to buy a small batch of the vendor 1 again.
Yeah.
To give yourself the breathing room so you're not feeling like you're rushing getting vendor 2 out. Because what happens if you're like, oh, whatever, it's probably fine. And then you buy vendor 2 stuff and then you have a ton of stock on hand that doesn't work for you. Nothing is worse.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I caught myself in a situation where I was nearly about to make Opulo dependent on a cost down second source for nozzles being perfect the first time.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Wait, no.
Yep.
We're not doing that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. We can feather that puppy in.
Yep.
Yeah. Does not need to be aggressive.
Yeah. Because a delay is more expensive than any cost down could save you.
Totally. Yeah. It's always a secondary thing. Like this is not the priority is shipping good hardware.
Yeah.
And shipping good hardware that still is as good and costs a little less to us is always below shipping good hardware.
If you happen to be listening this from Rivian, your situation may vary.
Why is that a Rivian thing?
Their car costs like 3x what it retails for.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a dramatic example. Wait, really?
Yeah. And same with I believe Apple too. Like the first iPads off the line cost a shit ton from like scrap rates.
That's wild. Oh, it's because of scrap rates.
Scrap rates, yeah, and like NRE. And
not the actual cogs.
Yeah, but no, Rivian costs a bunch of money. And it's on their job to cost it all down.
But only because of like manufacturing scrap, not because of the actual cogs of the thing.
No, I think it's everything.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's I mean, if you have VC money to burn, I guess that's an option, but that's not how we're playing the game. You still have to be profitable at your expensive rate, I think. Like I would never want to sell hardware that takes a loss unless you're that's a separate conversation, but like that's an aggressive way to do it. I wouldn't want to do it that way.
Yeah. Sometimes there's companies motivated in strange ways.
Yeah, that's fair.
But like sometimes our advice, I'll acknowledge like it's not as important as like getting something out there immediately.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. huge mega asterisk as always. We're just two dudes thinking about this the way we think about it. There might be very good reasons to not do anything we've ever said.
Yeah.
Probably are a lot of good reasons.
Like a fun fact, I spent a couple of months working at Markforged.
Right.
Not many people know that, but they did not do cost down.
Right.
That was a rule.
Yeah.
They didn't care. The machine cost what it needed to based off its like material cost.
Yeah.
Their machines were very expensive and they worked really well.
Yeah.
They would not switch a CNC milled part to die cast.
Interesting.
They didn't care to. They didn't want to screw with it.
Right. If it's good and it works, like they'd rather work on the next product
Yeah.
because, well, and it depends on how much you sell it for. If, the cost, your COGS is like super small in comparison, just like we said before, if it's a $20 thing for a $2,000 product, stop thinking about cost down, like do something else. It's not a worthwhile effort. And that's kind of what they're doing is like, if they save $5 per machine, it doesn't matter if the machine costs 25 grand. It just like doesn't matter.
Yeah. And they weren't necessarily right for this to be their priority, but the team was unified on that front and it worked well for them for a while.
Interesting. That's cool. I didn't realize that was part of their take.
Yeah. It's just like, it made me upset. But it's a funny thing to be like, yeah, it worked well for them. But if you look at their stock price.
Yeah, I know. It's not doing great.
Yeah. Okay, so that was a massive tangent while talking about NEMA 17.
That was a huge tangent.
But that's the OHM podcast for you.
Yeah.
The next example we had is filament.
Yes.
This example is a funny one because it was a cost down that went poorly.
Yeah.
We really forced a bad fit.
Yep.
And it cost us a bunch.
Yeah. And it wasn't, like so far when we've been talking about cost downs, it's mostly been about like the quality of the part. And this filament, the parts were beautiful. They were good and strong and all that stuff. But they just caused a lot of problems with printing. Like we had a lot of failed prints as a result and like really excessive wear on our printers and stuff like that. And that was the problem. So we were still like, it's cheaper. Like, is it worth the hassle?
Yeah.
It wasn't. We did save money on filament, but what we saved money on filament, we lost so much time on like fixing printers, buying new printers. Oh, this print didn't finish. We still need this part by this day. We need to blah, blah. It was the whole arc as a result.
Yeah, the filament was without like any additives or like impurities, but because of that made it super abrasive.
Yeah,
it would destroy nozzles. It would abrade and erupt through Bowden tubes.
Yeah,
it was miserable to work with.
Yeah, it was too bad.
And like that cost down was not worth it. At the same time, that aspect of using that material, we probably wouldn't have learned that without using it a bunch.
Yeah, we used a ton of it, and like for some other things, it's great. If you're using it, like I really liked the look and feel of that filament, but it just, we couldn't really run it on a farm very well. That became kind of a problem. It just didn't fit for us, right? It just wasn't good for that.
Yeah. So I think a good piece of advice is if your first production supply of cost down material is small and it gives you the ability to go, never mind, it's kind of nice.
Yeah.
We committed to like getting pallets of that stuff and we just had to push through it. It wasn't fun.
Yep.
It made the machines more down than up.
Yep.
It was a good, strong part in the end, but it made using printers more of a project than we had meant for it to.
Exactly. Yeah. Like things to consider when choosing a cost down is like, not just is the part not regressing, but like, is your process and general happiness regressing? Like that's a lot of it. And now we spend, and also to be fair, it was incredibly well priced. It was incredibly well priced. I still have spools of it that I use just like for fun stuff. Like it's cool filament, but it was just, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze for that. So now we spend more money on filament and it's just a solved problem. And, it's just like I said, when you pay less for something, something's lacking. What is lacking? You have to be okay with what that lacking is. We just happen to not be. They still have a place in the market. They still make a good product. It just didn't fit for us.
Yeah.
And we just found that balance after trying it and then moved to something different and it worked a lot better for us.
We've learned that we don't mind paying more for filament.
Yeah.
Some cost downs aren't worth it because it's too much of a hassle. We learned a lesson. We had some wounds to lick. So it won't always work out, and just be ready for that.
Yeah, be ready to switch to something else. You might have to cost up. That's okay. That's good to do. We've done that on a couple things. We're like, yeah, our fallout was not very good on this part. Like we had a lot of QC issues with it, and we get a more expensive part. It's going to happen the other direction too, and it should happen the other direction.
And sometimes a cost down will be like equaled out by something else needing to become more expensive.
Right. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Always good to keep these irons in the fire for that reason.
Yep. Yeah, this is an ongoing process.
A whole other category to touch on is in the IC, integrated circuit world.
Chips. So there's kind of like, there's two bodies of cost down here. There's where do you buy it? Because like if you need the Max 3078EE from Maxim Integrated, if you need that chip very specifically, you can get that exact part number from a lot of different places. So the first kind of cost down is getting that same actual product from a different place that will sell it to you cheaper. And then there's the cost down of literally a different part that does the same thing. So for the first one, great example is the EEPROM that we have on our blades, that how feeders know where they are on a rail. We were getting it, I think originally from like Mouser or something.
Yeah, because we needed it immediately for feeder launch.
Yeah, we needed to get them in hand. And we also weren't sure what our sales volume was going to be. So we didn't have, we couldn't buy a large quantity and get a good price break. So we just bought them from like Mouser or DigiKey or wherever, like one of those, direct couple day shipping kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
And then once feeders launch and we're like, oh yeah, we need a lot of these. Once you know that you're going to have a ton of these, you can actually try and go direct. You can try and actually buy them. So now we buy the EEPROMs directly from the manufacturer. So we go directly to Analog Devices and we buy a whole reel or 2 or 3 or whatever we need from them. And it's cheaper per part because there's no middleman. There's no value of, just go on Mouser and I get 10 of them tomorrow. That's their service. They're breaking out a whole spool for you and they charge a little more for it. If we need thousands of them, just go direct.
Yeah. You can't really do better than that without it becoming really dubious.
And there's also a lot of places that will sell you chips and do that kind of parting out whole spool thing. Check all of them. Like we probably buy chips from, I don't know, 4 different vendors. I can think of 4 or 5 maybe that we kind of distribute across.
We're not too loyal to anything in particular.
No, like we find as long as we have really good confidence that it's not a counterfeit chip, it's like a genuine chip, which just comes from experience of getting to know the vendor well. Let that pricing difference show itself, buy where it makes sense for you.
For sure.
So yeah, so that's the first type where I need this very specific part. I need to get it differently. Great example of something like this too is the STM32 that goes into the motherboard. I don't want any part variant on that at all. There is no exception. I need STM32 F407 VET6. That's what I need. No exceptions. It's a TQFP100. It has to be that chip.
Yep.
It can't be a clone. It can't be counterfeit. It has to be that. Non-negotiable. There's some examples of chips that like have a standard pinout. Mm-hmm. And it's a great example, or a great example of this is like an I2C EEPROM. There is a pinout for a SOIC 8 I2C EEPROM. If you can get an I2C EEPROM that, has the same, even if it doesn't talk the same and you can change it in software, but you don't have to change your PCB, you can just get a different chip that's pin compatible, that's way cheaper. And you do the validation, same thing. You have to do validation. That's a great cost down as well. If it costs you, $1.50, which is a lot for that chip, but still, let's just say, and then you can get one for 20 cents, but it does the same thing and you test it, you do all your lifetime testing, all that stuff with it, and it's fine. And, you can move it into your ecosystem. Okay. That's great. That's a great cost down. So there's kind of those 2 options. You could even change your PCB to support it too. If you really wanted to cost it down to a cheaper thing, you could do that as well.
And too, sometimes you'll design a PCB to have multiple footprints, keeping the cheaper component in mind for future compatibility.
That's true. Yeah, most of that is actually more for part stock out, but it's also for cost down as well. Like the feeder board is a great example of it because we actually have 2 of those. The LED, the RGB LED, there are 2 footprints on the board for the RGB LED. We use a really cool side firing one normally, but in case we can't get those or they get really expensive, we have another option because it seemed like it didn't seem like as much of a standard part as I wanted. So I wanted a little support there. And then microcontrollers, same thing. So we have the STM32 F031 is the one that we use for the feeder. And then we have a smaller version of it that actually the footprint sits inside the larger one. So if that one gets way more expensive, it's actually literally the exact same silicon die. They just turn on more ports for more pins. So it compiles the same. It's just like different pins are supported. It also means that all the firmware needs to support the smaller pin count, which is kind of weird, but it works great. And so, if it gets really expensive, we can just use the different chip that's cheaper and it's really nice, firmware compatible. So yeah, there's a lot of things you can do there. You should be careful because there are some pin compatible designs that are objectively worse. You need to be careful. In general, if I can't read a data sheet fully without having to put it through Google Translate does not capture the nuance of a data sheet well. I need to fully grok a data sheet. And if I can't get that, I don't really want to trust that part necessarily if I can't make sure that it's pin compatible. If I can't fully understand what's inside that black box, I don't want to put it in there.
It wouldn't be for us.
It would. Yeah, exactly. So, you just have to be really careful about what you choose to cost down. It's totally fine to. It's fine to find a cheaper thing if you validate the heck out of it and it works great. Awesome. That's fantastic. That's what that part is for. But you just have to be careful. It should go under the same validation requirements that you have for any other part like a motor.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. It's definitely tread cautiously here, but as long as you do your homework, read your data sheets, build the product and test it to make sure it passes your same scrutinous QC requirements. Mm-hmm. Might be okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, you get some options there. We have a couple of those, but not too many. I think for the most part, we have pretty much name brand stuff for most things.
It's just always easier too.
Yeah, There's some things to not bother skimping on. I'm never going to get a Giga device clone for the STM32s. I want legitimate STM32s.
Yeah, and
I just want to play that.
Like I said up top, the STM32 is not in the top 10% of expensive stuff.
That too.
And like,
yeah.
Think about how much time it would take Steven to feel good shipping an IC that's $1 cheaper.
Exactly.
On a
like
$2,000 machine.
It's not worth it.
It would never amortize.
No, it's just not worth it. Yeah, that's true.
So keep that in mind.
Yeah. It's a good point.
Don't do a cost down just because it's fun.
Right. If you see that there's a part and it's a third the price and you're like, oh, maybe I should do that. How many of those parts are you really using? Is it 70 cents difference and there's one per machine and it's a critical part? Forget about the cheaper one. Don't even think about it. Like, just don't bother, you know?
Yeah.
But if it's a pretty straightforward thing, you don't have to worry that much about it, and you have a lot of them, you've tested it already, go for it. Like, it's worth it. It's worth it to validate it.
Yep. The final example we have here is a funny one because it's just shipping.
Yeah.
I had found myself being upset with what it had cost to get material from one vendor to us. All I said was, can you ship this cheaper? And they offered, oh, we have slow shipping. Would you like slow shipping? And I go, what's that? She goes, 30-day transit door to door. And I go, oh, okay, how much is it? And she's like, it's 1/4 the price. I was like, okay.
And you can also kind of do a small, quick airship order as a stopgap, and then get stuff on the water at the same time. Like we did that at Formlabs a lot too.
Yes, that's actually what I do. So
yeah,
sometimes my sourcing's reactionary because the scrap or fallout leads to dock out sooner than expected.
Yeah.
And like, I'm like, oh shoot, I'll get something airshipped and I'll ask for 75% of the order to be put on the sea.
Yeah.
And I do that a lot now.
Yeah.
And it gets stuff. Honestly, sometimes stuff shows up within 15 days. I don't really understand how or why.
But it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably more just an insurance policy of like, sometimes it can take up to 30, but like,
I think sometimes it's, our order is still airshipped and it's just combined with other items.
Oh,
in like a big wood crate.
Sure.
And it just takes a couple extra days to pick it apart and filter it out.
We should really have Bar Smith from Maslow on. Well, like we need to have him on in general. I've been poking him recently to try and come on because I think he'd be such a cool person to have on.
But he had gotten all his stock from China in one shipping container.
Yeah.
With a I don't know how he did it. I'd love to hear from him what that experience is like and how.
Totally. I want to learn. I have no idea how he did that.
I know how I would do that, but Oculus never brokered a shipping container to go across the ocean on our behalf.
Right. Yeah. And they did 2.
Yeah.
They did 2 of them. So yeah. Oh man. After talking with him a little bit about it, it's like, it sounded like it was a wacky experience. After we have Bar on for like an intro episode, I want to have him on for one about shipping because I think that would be such an interesting one. I love how he plays the game. He does I really like how he structures things. Like he's such a good dude.
Yeah, the Maslow CNC is a really cool product.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, we'll put a link in the episode description. It's like a CNC machine that uses belts to move itself around on a wall. It's so cool. I got one of the Kickstarter backing ones. I was thinking about putting it together on a live stream. It's such a cool machine.
Forgot you have that. Yeah, it's overdue.
Yeah, I really should put it together. It'd be fun. It'd be fun. But yeah,
that was my last example. There's a bunch more that could be said. Overall, like keep an eye out on your supply chain and like look for those low hanging fruits.
Yep.
Look for the things that are worth de-risking. Look for where you could save some money and put that value towards something else for your customers.
Yep. There's a phrase you say a lot of like, we're paying the idiot tax, which is a great phrase that we've taken on a lot. It's like sometimes, you did something, not even that you did something dumb or that you're an idiot, but it's like, I'm going to pay money to solve this problem and not think about the best way right now because I just need this problem out of my way. You're paying a lot of idiot tax up front if you're optimizing getting your product out the door, and you're paying for quality you don't need. And then costing down is a way of stopping paying your idiot tax, right? You're slowly reducing where you're kind of spending this money that you don't need and like only paying for what you need.
No, but yeah, look for those areas of your supply chain where, you paid a little bit more to go quick and not think about it. Just reassess. You'll find some savings. Yep. I'm sure of it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always a place to explore, and it changes too, like new things come up on the market, vendors change prices. Like this is a never ending game. You kind of always have to be at least keeping your eyes peeled for it. Every time you order a part, be like, is this the best we can do? Poke around a little bit. It's kind of just a constant burn after you do your first pass at things. See what's out there. Just keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah. You can even ask for help in our Discord. Go on Twitter, tweet the electronics folks.
Yeah. There's a lot of resources for finding that kind of thing too.
For sure.
Yep. Cool.
All right. Let's wrap up.
Let's do it. All right, folks, that's it for this one. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to leave a review wherever you get your podcast. It helps us out a ton. You can find Opula on Twitter and Instagram. And also don't forget to check out opula.io and sign up for our newsletter where we write blog posts and do customer interviews with other folks building open hardware. And we'll see you in the next one.
See ya.
There it is. See ya.
Hello and welcome to the Open Manufacturing Art.
Swing and a miss.